we're joined right now by our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo, I want to jump right into it because I want to get into a couple of topics. First, here domestically, and then what's going on with NATO and Ukraine, Russia. First off, though, we know Title 42 was put in place by the administration you served in to, again, during the pandemic, that allowed the immediate expulsion of illegal migrants back to Mexico. It expires next month. And there is talk that the Biden administration might allow it to expire during the beginning of the high season, because the warmer weather, of illegal immigration, which we have seen, again, record numbers at month to month to month, quarter to quarter to quarter. This idea that they would let this go. I mean, with an end to this program, can you end this program at all right now without having a massive additional crisis at our border?
Well, Jordan, I know you and Jay and the ACLJ have been at the center of making sure American sovereignty was protected everywhere and always. If they allow Title 42 to expire, this would be just another chink in that armor, another step along the way towards radically open borders. It's part of what the Biden administration campaigned on. It's part of what the progressive left is demanding from him, and it presents real risk to the United States of America. I hope that they will extend Title 42. It made enormous sense. Don't forget, not only does it allow these folks in, but it sends a message. It will send a message to those who are trying to get here that this administration, this is the time, this is the window. Come to the United States, travel here illegally, and we'll do nothing to stop you from coming across, entering America, and ultimately becoming part of American society. It's really risky with the fentanyl stuff. It's all dangerous.
You know, the fentanyl issue, of course, is a epidemic of unbelievable proportions, and I don't know if people understand that the porousness of our southern borders has allowed this fentanyl to get into the United States and is causing literally millions of deaths around our country. It's a serious problem.
It's a real problem, Jay. And, you always know when the problem has increased because you can tell what fentanyl costs on the market. And today the price is low. That means supply is high. The demand is rising to meet that supply. And it's impacting citizens all across the country, in rural areas and suburban places like my home state of Kansas, in urban cores. This is a chemical and a substance that comes largely from China, shipped to Mexico, and then because we're not doing a darn thing to enforce controlling what's coming in and out of our southern border, moving into the United States along I-35, and then spreading throughout our country, wreaking devastation on many communities.
It's a lot of families have been touched with this. I mean, I'm furious when I think about the way in which this administration has gone about this. Let me ask one last question on that. If, in fact, Title 42 is terminated, which it seems it will be at the end of the month, they don't seem to have anything to fill in the gap, so to speak. So are we going to see back to those caravans and record numbers of people trying to get in here and the disaster at the border that we saw just last year with the Biden administration? Is that what's going to be the end result?
Jay, we've seen the numbers when you begin to send the message to El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, places all around the world, frankly, that says this will be a welcoming environment. We're not going to turn you back. Consistent with American law, we're going to just allow you to come into the United States. It is very likely that the numbers already staggering, already multiples of times what they were during the final 2 years of the Trump administration. Staggering numbers will only continue to increase. And Jay, you know this, not only are these drugs coming in horrific, but what happens to people who are transiting Mexico is the worst of the worst. And we ought not permit that to happen for so many reasons, including making sure we know who's coming into our country who might want to do harm to us here.
I want to shift Secretary Pompeo to what's going on right now. We know the president is in Brussels, is in NATO, and then meeting with the G7. Today marks 1 month. It's been 1 month since the Russian assault on Ukraine began. Now, a lot of folks thought that this would not take a month and then we wouldn't necessarily be here, but we are now here. The Ukrainians have fought back. So President Biden, he's there. They're discussing a plan to bolster NATO's eastern flank and counter the prospect of escalation. There's fear of nuclear attack. You have Kremlin spokespeople going out in English saying we've got the justification to use nuclear weapons. What needs to happen? What should Joe Biden be doing right now when he's at these meetings?
So a handful of things. One, I'm glad they're there. I'm glad they're having these conversations. But as you all well know, conversations without real substance and strategic leadership aren't worth the time spent on them. There's a handful of things. The first is to make it very clear the cost of Vladimir Putin if he uses any kind of WMD, a chemical weapon, a biological weapon, or God forbid, a nuclear weapon. We should be crisp and clear that NATO will respond in a way that will impose a staggering cost on him. We should do this before, not wait till he's done it and then mess around and take months. We should be ready to respond in that way. Second, I'm glad they're putting increased presence in Eastern Europe. I would hope that the Europeans would take the heavy load there, would take the real burden. And then finally, we should not forget, in spite of the fact they are meeting in Brussels in Europe, it's a series of European leaders. We shouldn't forget that the Chinese Communist Party is watching all of this. Chairman Kim launched the longest missile he has ever launched, according to reports. We should never misunderstand that while we're focused on Ukraine, the whole world is watching what we're doing in Iran, giving them a sweet deal, watching Chairman Kim fire a missile with nothing but a statement from the State Department coming out. This has a real risk of cascading, and the European leaders and the American leaders there on the ground in Brussels should be talking about how it is we're going to restore the order and deterrence that we had for the previous 4 years.
You know, the Biden administration is considering removing the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. This, to me, is another unbelievable, from the U.S. terror watch list. The status of the Revolutionary Guard is supposedly one of the last sticking points of the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. Iran's the largest state sponsor of exporter of terrorism in the world. Russia's been negotiating as the middleman here in this whole thing. If they were to do this, if they were to make this move, Mr. Secretary, what are the consequences?
Jay and Jordan, you know the Revolutionary Guards force well, right? You know their history. You know they've killed so many Americans. You know they've been assassinated across the world, including in the Middle East, to their fellow Muslim brothers. We know that they've launched assassination campaigns in Europe. To allow them off the hook for that terror, to deny the factual reality that their sole focus is exporting terror from Iran to gain leverage for the Ayatollah and the Iranian leadership, to now say we're going to lift that designation, we're going to take our moral authority away and the sanctions away, it is so confounding. It will provide money so that the Ayatollah can continue to increase the amount of money available for this terror. It'll provide resources to the Revolutionary Guards. This will only increase the scope and scale of terror emanating from Iran, and it is dangerous not only for the Gulf states, but for Israel and the United States as well.
Do you think, seems, Secretary Pompeo, final question for today, and we covered a lot of topics, but it seems like this is just another carrot that the Biden administration feels like they've got to give to Iran to get back into the JCPOA or the nuclear deal for the final 3 years of that deal.
Jordan, it's odd. There's nothing left in the deal. The timeline has shrunk, which will give them a clear pathway to a nuclear weapon. There's no constraints on their missile systems or their space program. There's no limitations on their capacity to commit terror around the region. Indeed, we're going to lift the sanctions on their primary tool for terror exportation. It's incomprehensible that this piece of paper would be signed by the United States of America and think for a moment it was going to protect families all across this country.
All right, Secretary Pompeo, as always, we appreciate your insight into all of this.